Wednesday.
Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. We are super excited to be with you guys today. As you can see, we have a very beautiful guest with us, Gayle Reaume, and we will get to giving her proper introduction in a little bit. Today, we're talking about teaching financial literacy to kids, and we're going to have an amazing conversation with Gayle. She's an expert in this area. She's got so much insight to provide to us, and I'm super excited to dive in. But before we do that, obviously, first things first, we're going to dive in a little bit to the wine of the week, which I'm very, very excited about. Michelle actually sent me a TikTok, which I'm terrible at TikTok, but I'm trying to learn. She sent me a TikTok earlier this week of a girl who was doing a highlight on different wines. And essentially, I guess, synonyms or wines that are like Sauvignon Blanc, but are better because everybody's obsessed with Sauvignon Blanc and everybody drinks it. But there's so many other amazing varietals that are going to drink above a Sauvignon Blanc and be either more affordable or along the same lines. So if you want to mix it up. And anyways, I was reading in the comments and everybody was like starkly standing up for Sauvignon Blanc. So if you guys are offended by the fact that we're giving you Sauvignon Blanc alternatives, I apologize, but both can be good. Today we're drinking a Vermentino, which comes from Sardinia in Italy. This is one of my all-time favorite varietals of whites. It's going to be really crisp, really acidic, really bright, great for the summertime, but it's also going to have a little bit more body and a little bit more character to it than a Sauvignon Blanc will. It's a super, super elegant, finessed wine. You're going to get a little bit of green apple, grapefruit tones, but it's not going to be overpowering the way that it would be in like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And this one is growing from between two prestigious regions and is labeled as a Superwa due to the fact that it's growing between those two regions in Sardinia. And it's going to be very velvety, medium bodied, and it has more than enough citrus and minerality to kind of round it out on the back end. But this drink's almost Burgundy-esque to me. It's a $20 bottle, so it's a little higher than the price point that we normally feature on here. But this is going to drink like a $50 bottle. It's beautiful. It's bright. Definitely a crowd pleaser. And I always am looking for different Vermentinos. This specific producer, one of my favorites, John Cara. And as always, we'll post this out on our Instagram for you guys to go and look up if you're looking for something to bring to your next party. This is one that I think is really good for this season because if you're in Texas, it's still pretty hot. We're getting a little bit of a chill at night. So the little bit of the increase in body on this can stand up to that. And it's a really good one before we get into like major holiday swings. It's kind of a transitional wine. I really love this one. And I hope you guys, if you're able to grab it, can enjoy it. You got it this time, didn't you, Michelle?
Yes, I did. It's very good. Yeah, I found it.
Well, super exciting.
Yeah.
And we'll get into our roses and our thorns for the week as well. So Mish, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So my rose for the week is this past weekend I went apple picking upstate, and I know I've said it so much before on here how much I love fall and doing all the fall things. So I got the chance to go with my dad this past weekend. We thought it was going to be pretty late in the season, but it actually wasn't. It was nice because it was a little more quiet. There were a ton of apples left and got some apple cider donuts, and they were so yummy. Yep, they were so good. Let's see, my thorn of the week was, well, last week we actually took a little mental health break and skipped the live stream and actually missed it so much. It's like, I love coming here and talking to everyone. So that was my thorn, and I'm happy to be back and, to be here with Jenny and Gayle.
I missed it too. I was going to California for a strategic coach, and Wednesday is always my travel day when I'm going to California for a conference on Thursday or Friday. So unfortunately, we took the very much needed break, but I did miss it as well.
Yes. What about you, Jenny?
Yeah. So my rose last week was I finally got a new bed. My husband and I bought our house that we currently live in initially as an investment property. So when we furnished it, we put a lot of like, I don't want to say it definitely wasn't like cheap furniture, but it wasn't like stuff that you want to have in your everyday home in our house. And so our bed frame was like driving me nuts for the past, like however long we lived here. And the one that I wanted was on back order forever and ever. And we finally got it. And I swear to you, the night that we got that bed, I slept so well. I was like, this is amazing. So super excited about that. And then my thorn from last week was, I know we've done an episode with you guys before on the fact that real estate investing is very glamorized in our society, and everybody thinks it's so sexy all the time, and nobody really talks about the pitfalls and how challenging it can truly be from time to time. So we have an investment property in Houston that we've had a long-term tenant in for the past 18 months. And she called me yesterday and she's breaking her lease, which, it happens, but it's a really bad time of year for that to happen because people don't like to move during the holidays. So just kind of threw a wrinkle in plans, and it's going to be challenging. So again, transparency surrounding real estate investing. It's not always rainbows and sunshine. But Gayle, what about you? Tell us about, we were talking before, I know you've had a really dynamic week, so excited to hear about your rose and your thorn.
Yeah, the life of an entrepreneur, it's like 1 minute, everything's like, woohoo! But around the business, I've had some real good traction with some investors and some new opportunities to take our programming and our product into the credit union space. And a conversation with a private school owner about using it as a project in their school to handle their bucks. The kids get bucks for winning grade points, whatever. And so they're going to use it potentially to manage that. And that's going to be the beginnings of these kids learning how to budget, even though it's just their little fake money from school. But it'll be a great opportunity for parents to see that and possibly, want to use that at home with real money with their kids. So that was really exciting. My daughter got engaged last week, which was a big deal. We knew it was coming, but it was quite a nice celebration for that. Just the thorns of continuing to build a tech company when I'm not a tech native. I did not grow up with this stuff. And so some super big challenges around breakdowns with the app and trying to get into the back end and fix things. And that's always a big thorn, but learning a lot. That's the best part. Got to constantly be learning from those things. So
I love that. Well, congratulations to your daughter. That's fantastic. And to you. How exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to have a son.
I love it. It's funny that you mentioned, the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. I feel like that's a tenet that we can all relate to. And I definitely think it's something that people need to have more transparency around. Like, this is hard work, you guys. And in order to be successful in anything, as Gayle has been successful, you got to get out of your comfort zone sometimes. And at the conference that I was at last week, one of the most interesting tenets to me that they were talking about, they were looking at a flywheel of trying to accomplish something on an entrepreneurial journey. And it was like capability, courage. And there was a couple, it's like the 4 C's, I forget all of them, but one of the last C's was confidence. And one of the biggest misnomers was people who are starting out on any sort of journey or endeavor in an entrepreneurial space, they think the confidence should be first. But in reality, the confidence is last. Yeah. And once you understand that and you commit to your journey, you realize you've never done it before. How could you be confident about it? Yeah. And the only confidence that you can really bring into that endeavor is confidence that you've had from successes in the past, even if they're not related. So I commend you, Gayle, for jumping feet first into the tech space, even though there's a huge learning curve with regard to that. So that's amazing.
Well, I heard a funny quote about that from the founder of Canva. And she was writing about, having had some failures. And she said, it's funny to think there's, 8 billion people in the world all trying to do things, and everybody's a first timer. Like, everybody's learning it. Nobody has confidence or has a clear picture. Everything that's ever been built, and Steve Jobs talks about this, is not everything that's been built was built by somebody who just had an idea and tried it.
Yeah.
There is no map that says, here's how to do all these things. And, that kind of feeds right into the whole, how do we learn anything?
Yeah,
right?
I love that.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that. And I think so many times people don't understand that success doesn't happen overnight, and it's definitely not linear, right? Like we've got an idea in our brains, but it doesn't always pan out that way. So yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
So you guys, I had the amazing pleasure of meeting Gayle at an event several weeks ago, and it was an event for women, and we were all networking, and she introduced herself, and I was blown away by what she's working on and the services that she can provide and the knowledge that she's been able to glean over the years of building her company, Moolah U. And she is just smart as a whip. She's got so much to offer. I'm so excited to have her on. I think she's got a lot of value to add, especially to those of you who might be new parents and have, skin in the game with regard to teaching kids financial literacy. I know Michelle and I have talked to you guys ad nauseum about how that was not a tenet of our childhood and how much we wish that it was, and how
Mhm.
we take it on the chin so much to kind of learn these things on our own. And our whole goal in life is to make sure that you guys don't have to. So Gayle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what inspired you to start Moolah U?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate all the acknowledgement. It's really been fun. I had a long career in all kinds of sales and marketing, and started a parenting magazine. I've just always sort of followed whatever was needed in the moment that I was having fun with. I had a jewelry company with my husband. I mean, I've had a lot of fun. And then I had a kid. And so when she was, 5, 6 years old and like starting to ask for a lot of things, and I had no idea how to talk to her about it. I was making all the decisions. And, then there was always the push and pull, like, why can't I have more Barbies? And had no idea how to explain all that. And fortunately, my parents were very good at least trying and putting in place more experiential opportunities for us to learn. Um, and that is sort of a generational. It's sort of skipped a generation now. We expect everything to be taught in school, or somehow magically we're just going to get good grades and then get out there in life and everything will be fine. And so I started tapping into some of the things that my parents had done, and I called my mom, and my daughter was in Montessori, and I just started putting together some ideas about what if she was responsible for those decisions. What if she got to say, and had a budget and said, this is how much we have. And so gradually, I just started transferring financial responsibility to her. Like one of the first things I did with her, which is so funny, and I think a lot of parents have tried this, which is, give her some money and let her go to a garage sale, let's say. That's what we did. And let her try to buy some things and let her start to see how money works and how things are valued and how to bargain or whatever. And she was so cute. People were just like, "Oh, she doesn't have to pay for that." I'm like, "Well, you're taking away the whole lesson, So it did come down to the whole. I think it was Barbies, and really wanted this very expensive Barbie. I don't even want her having Barbies, and she wanted a more expensive one. And I said, "Well, listen, here's how much money there is in the family's budget," because I had just bought a house and I was a newly single mom, and I was just like, this is, got to be really practical with my money to make it all work. And I said, so here's how much you can have every week, and I'll give you this with $2 or something a week, and then you can start to figure out how many Barbies you can get and how you can buy those Barbies. And so she suddenly didn't want that $45 Barbie. She wanted to get, just 2 of the $20 ones or whatever. It was just like, the light went off for me, which was, what if she had to make those decisions, and there was nothing she could, argue with me about. I'd already given her the money. It was hers to do with what she wanted. She had to figure it out. And it did a couple of things. It put a lot more autonomy and confidence and responsibility on her part. And the learning was amazing. And then secondly, she started wanting to learn how to make money, which, we all want our kids to have, an interest in that. But they're not going to get interested if they don't need it, right?
Yeah.
So as long as we're continuing to make the decisions and buy things and give, and then the arguments happen, there's no incentive for them. But when she knew she wasn't getting any more money that week or whatever for that, then she had to figure out how to do more. And so from a very young age, she was very entrepreneurial. And that was just another light bulb for me. So like she was probably about 7 or 8 when I was in an investment club with my girlfriends. Way back then, I was trying to learn about, the adult versions of how do you build wealth? How do you actually create something of, that's lasting instead of just the grind of, payday, the cycle of burn and earn spending. And so she was hanging around with me and these women from the time she was born, was in these investment club meetings with my girlfriends. And mostly we drank wine and chanted. But we ended up buying Apple for $11. And, we ended up buying some really cool things because we just all learned how to relate to that. And it helped us relate to money in general. And we all started getting more frugal or conscientious about how we were doing our own money. So she was listening to all that, and she wanted to have an investment club for herself with her girlfriends or her kids' friends from school. And so I went about trying to find some kind of, curriculum or something. And then, it's junior achievement. There's a bunch of programs. And what I noticed is that they were all very much, let me tell you about the rule of 72. And I'm like, they're 8 years old. Like, they're not gonna, it doesn't mean anything. I could see right away that was going to be. And then I started really researching the outcomes of those kinds of programs. And, there's an impact. Definitely there's an impact when you have conversations with kids about money. But until there's any applied learning, there's no real behavior that comes about from that. You can't build a mindset without going out there and trying something. I could sit here all day and define what gravity is to you. But until you drop something and it breaks, you don't really get the true impact of what gravity is. So money is a very similar conversation or very similar concept. And children are not designed to take on these complex concepts from a standpoint of information.
Right.
It means nothing. So in this investment club, I started actually by trying to teach them a couple of those principles, and it was pretty bad. It was clearly not going to work either. So I started doing some conversations about how can you make money. There's a bunch of things money does. Money is used, you earn money, and then you can use money versus just spend, because the only word in the English language around money is spending. So we just shifted it like, well, wow, you could use it to make more money. You can use it for charity. You can use it to buy things you like. And sometimes you might have to save for those. And we started working on projects around how could they earn some money. And this brilliant sort of entrepreneurship idea came up in the club, and the kids did a project. And it took a couple of weeks. We were making things each week in the club. And then the final day we went out in front of the school and sold them to people at pickup. And it was just clever little cards. I think they were greeting cards. And the kids were like, wow, because they'd had to pay for the supplies. They were like, we can bring our own markers. I'm like, yeah, but this is a business. And you're going to run a business, and you're going to buy the markers. And this is, you all are investing. And I'd given them a loan, and we bought the stuff. And then they made their product, and they paid their loan back. And then they divided up the money. And I mean, it was amazing. And these kids were like, we want to do this again. We want a whole week of camp. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I figured it out. I got a bunch of Montessori teachers and entrepreneurs, and we did a little accelerator. We did a little entrepreneur camp where they did a project for the whole week. And there were like 25 kids in there. It was insane. And it turned out really great. They did, we were at Casa de Luz, which is an organic macrobiotic restaurant, and all the people that were walking past where we were in this room were all, pretty healthy people, and they liked to garden, and they didn't want to use pesticides. So these kids came up with the idea of selling organic plants with ladybugs, because ladybugs are a natural pesticide. And they built this whole business in a week. It was insane. And they loved it. And I remember at the very end, because I was given them a loan, they paid it back, and then they had to split the profits. Well, 24 kids or whatever, I had to give them $14.13. I will never forget that number, because Friday, at the end of the day, I had to come up with $14.13 24 times.
Oh my gosh.
And so what we ended up with was getting banks to sponsor us, where the money would be put into an account at the bank, and the parents would open a bank account for the kids at that bank. And so that was a real huge asset for the banks to get new customers. Getting young customers is really important.
Yeah.
because people kept their bank accounts, I think, for an average of 29 years. I mean, I met with an investor today who was telling me he had his bank account from college and he had it until he was 40.
Wow.
That's a long time, right? You
That
know,
is a long time. Yeah.
so when we look at the market of what we can do to entice children to learn about money, and banks are really interested, with credit unions and community banks are far more interested in actually building good skills and habits for their members so that they stay members and they get value from that. And so this is one of the ways that we're now working with these organizations to, partner in this important piece of the education or the knowingness about money. Institutions are going to be a big part of how we manage our money. You're always going to be investing in an institution or with vehicles, assets, right? And understanding that is really important from a young age. So that all happened. The camp kind of blew up. We started doing more and more of them in Austin. We ended up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in 2009, right after the crash. Everybody was all worried about that. And so front page story about our camp, and then everybody in the world wanted it, which was true. But I was doing this as a hobby. I had no idea how to scale that. So I went into an accelerator for women through Texas State, and it was called Accelerate, and it was only women trying to launch businesses. And so I came out of that with the idea of doing a franchise. And so I franchised the camp program. And then we sold franchises to people around the country who were then doing the summer camps. And that was all really great. And then I started off looking at what can parents do at home, because this is the number one thing we hear. Their kids have a phenomenal experience. Parents can see the light go off, in their kids' heads they come home talking about assets and liabilities and profit and loss. And parents are like, what? And so it was very exciting. And parents were like, we want to know how to do this stuff. So we launched some parent courses, some online parent courses. And those were going really great. And then parents were like, well, now we need this whole system for doing all these things. We need a tool. We need an app. So in 2017, we started researching whether or not we could implement or embed all of these methodologies for learning about money in an app. And after doing the research, we decided to proceed, and we went into another accelerator called Mass Challenge out of Boston and Massachusetts. And it became really evident that this was going to be a great product, and the banks were already lining up to partner with us. And we got out of that accelerator in the spring of 2020. Wow. So we walked straight into COVID, and all the camps were done. We couldn't do them anymore. It was a pretty traumatic time, but at the same time, I kind of like to think about things like that as I call it a crisis-opportunity, because
love it.
Doing the camps live was really challenging. It was a heavy operational lift. We basically were providing daycare essentially, so we had all these requirements, and it was a lot of manpower and a lot of materials and a lot of facilities, and just it was a lot of work. So we quickly spent a couple of months just revamping the whole thing to be virtual. And then we ended up in 6 different countries that summer.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. We picked up a woman in Australia as a licensee, and she did it all over in those time zones. And my camp leader that was here was bilingual, so we ended up doing that in Spanish in countries in South America, and of course, all over the U.S. and all the different time zones. And it was a really heavy operational lift, but it was a lot easier to produce. And that went on for about 2 years, and now basically people are back to wanting to do live camps. But that helped us transition from, being able to continue bootstrapping. Yeah. Because raising money for a new company is, it's a heavy lift, and we would have needed a lot of money, and there really wasn't investment going on in that realm. And so we just shifted, and but we have never stopped building the app. This is the best part. These kids who do our programs, they stick around and they stay involved in programs such as our apprentice program, which is for the teens as they become leaders. They want to be more involved in running the camps. And so they're like counselors at camps. And some of them even come back after college and lead camps when they were live. And so a bunch of them were, really interested in apps. I mean, everybody younger than us is interested in that kind of stuff. They're all building stuff. And so I engaged a couple of them. They were in college. One of them was still in high school. And they started building the app on a no-code platform. So we got the app built in a very MVP mode and got out there just recently and finished all of our beta testing with parents. So
congratulations.
Yeah. Real thing. Yeah. That's a lot
very cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so much of what you said, Gayle, like it's so interesting to hear that evolution of not only how being an entrepreneur necessitates you to pivot and change and to move with the times and to make sure that you're filling that gap as that gap changes, right? But also, I think it was so amazing that you shared that you had that investing group of women that kind of like spurned this. And that's like the community that we're building here.
Exactly, yeah.
The more representation that you see and the more people actually talking about what it is that they're doing, and you see somebody successfully doing that or ideating with other people, the easier it is for you to duplicate that and make sure that you're kind of walking in that same vein. So I think that is so timely for you to mention that as kind of the catalyst for all of this, especially that your daughter got to see that. That's great.
The group went on, by the way, for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And most of us pretty much stuck together. I think the meetings kind of started fizzling at the end because people were moving. And one of the things that was so cool is that everybody in that group was motivated to do things outside of whatever they were earning. They were investing in real estate. They were starting small companies, and whether it was just a little lifestyle business. One of the women started making, with her daughter, these sort of these fanny pack pouches, or I can't describe them properly, but her daughter ended up taking that business and growing it, and it still exists in a pretty large way. So everybody was sort of engaging in using money for something other than spending, but also other than just even investing in the stock market. The institutional investing track is, for a long time, the only thing people thought they needed to do. And, I don't understand the stock market. That's how I started the club, or why we started that. We wanted to understand that. We thought that was how you invest. And what we really gained was this broad experience of how money is in many ways, how to use it in many ways. And then just that community of people. I mean, we went through a couple of marriages and divorces and kids and grandkids, and we've been through it all together. So that was super special, especially that it was all women. Men used to try to join, but we wouldn't.
We're like women and allies, but where you put a group of women together, shit gets done, you guys.
Exactly. It does. It does. Well, thank you, Gayle, for sharing a little more about your background. I love what you're doing. I'm a huge advocate for this and see the importance. And let me ask, why is it crucial to start teaching financial literacy to children at a young age? And then can you also share some examples of how financial education can have a long-term impact on a child's life and financial well-being?
Yeah. I find the word financial literacy a little bit interesting because, life skills, reading and learning and how certain things require us to just look at a book and do things. I don't like to think about literacy when you consider life skills. Like you don't become bicycle literate when you're learning to ride a bike. And so maybe the word is capable, financial capability, that we're really wanting to engage for ourselves and our families and our kids. And, when the studies are showing, without financial literacy for many years, generations ago, you learned it because you were all sitting at the kitchen table with money in little envelopes and everybody knew what the budget was and money was just really quite a bit different. And then we moved into this, the 70s and up, really just where everybody was middle class. It was easy to just manage, the parents to just manage the money and not consider how their kids were doing. And there was this huge pressure for everything to be taught in school. And parents were just like sending them off and then figuring they'd come home with this brilliant experience of life. And And then you started seeing the wave of kids that were heading into college that didn't know how to, screw a light bulb in. They hadn't gotten capable at anything other than being like really good students. I heard it a lot when I was first starting 20 years ago with parents, I'd say, I've got this cool little money club, and oh, well, my kids don't need to learn that. They just need to get good grades. I heard it a lot. And those same parents are the ones who I coached once their kids were out of college and at home living on their sofa because they hadn't put the energy in early. Whereas the children that have gotten more experiential learning have built capability. And so, we can see in the studies of what has happened in financial, there was a big push. Parents were really pushing, they still are. This has to be in the schools. And, we're seeing that the outcomes of that are horrible, just disastrous, when that's the only place that they're learning about it. And what we also found is that 99% of what kids report that they know about money is what they learned at home. 99%. If you ask them, they're not going to say, well, I took this junior achievement class. No. My parents do it this way. So it's really imperative that we as parents and as community and as a culture take on the ownership of raising capable children. It's just, we've got to circle back into that place where this stuff comes from home. And we can see it pretty much across all social issues, problems, when there's not a good structural foundation at home for all the types of life skills, capabilities of, just being a compassionate neighbor, being a, spiritual person, being a good community person, all of these things that make for a good life. Yeah. Because if we don't operate as a community, if we don't become financially stable as individuals, then we can't contribute to the community. We're in scarcity all the time. And scarcity is so fearful, and it just breeds more fear and it breeds more separation. So, if you look at this from a very large, high perspective of what's happening in a culture where it's so divided, and when we can start to come together and be more prosperous together. So I've really been watching the cultural shifts that are going on around that, and especially having been able to see the kids that have been through our programs. So from the very beginning, when they learned that money is to be used for more than just spending, they've grown to be extremely capable kids. I hear from their parents. I've gone to some of these kids' weddings, wow. And their parents attribute, and these kids will attribute their experience of how they're managing money now as what they got out of being in Moolah U. And they're starting businesses, side gigs sometimes. Some of them are entrepreneurs, but a lot of them are just being far more, practical with their money and able to do a lot more stable things early on, buying homes in their early 20s, getting out of college without any debt, just operating in the world where they've just got a big head start on the kids that didn't have the experience of learning about money. And sometimes you learn about it, it's very hard. Tell a couple of stories. And I always like to talk about my daughter. And she might be listening, but she doesn't mind. But I was doing this money thing with her where I was giving her pieces of money, like gradually adding categories. So at first it was Barbies, and then it was, her birthday presents for friends. And, I was already going to spend the money. But I didn't want to be the one to have to make the decision and figure out how to do that. So I just started gradually adding categories, and pretty soon she had her whole clothing budget, and, all of that. And I gave her the money to pay for her cell phone bill because, she could decide if she wanted to add some money to that and get a bigger plan or get something other than a flip phone. All of those things were her decisions to make now. Mm-hmm. And early on, I decided I would give her the money for her car and give it to her in monthly increments, because then she'd learn how to save them. She'd have this big chunk of money at the end. And I said I'd pay for half of what I thought would be what a car would cost when she was 16. And, she was doing great. I was watching. She had categories in her savings accounts and spreadsheets. She was very meticulous about it. But, oh, boy, she hit 14 and ACL tickets, and she needed a new guitar. And her friends wanted to go to ACL, so she bought them tickets, and then pretty soon that car money was gone.
Generous friend.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have very much money to buy a car. So thankfully her aunt was selling a car, but it was like a stick shift and it was real old. And her aunt let her pay it out over time. And you know, what a lesson. And she'd had lessons like that all along where she had used her money, you know, inappropriately from what it was intended for. But you know, those were how she figured out, you know, what savings is, what it is to budget, what it means to delay gratification. All of those lessons happened, and I never had to teach them.
That's amazing.
And that's the beauty of doing it this way. I never had to give her the lecture about, well, if you use this money this way, then you won't be able to do it that way. You know, I just didn't ever have to be that kind of parent. You know, and what I kind of see this as is the idea that they're suddenly going to become adults and they're going to know how to adult. What if they were doing those adult things in a very small, age-appropriate way? You know, they're just beginning to take on the typical responsibilities of being human. You know, there's no magic line when you turn 18 and you're suddenly an adult and you know how to do these things. You have to build to those. So that was really the premise of what we did. And the long-term impact is that there's so much more freedom of choice. You know, we know the statistics around women, especially, who don't have good command of money and the tragedies that become very real for them when they're in relationships that aren't working and they can't leave, or they leave. And, you know, the statistics are horrifying. When people get divorced, men recover financially in 3 years. Women never recover. And it's just a shame, right? So we definitely want to have people being capable enough to, you know, navigate building great lives. And especially if you think about moms who are trying to manage this and they take on the bulk of parenting responsibilities, and they have not actually had the experience of learning this themselves. And there's so much guilt. There's so much guilt when parents aren't doing anything that's not working, or, you know, there's so many things you have to consider about raising your children. So doing these things that are very, you know, incrementally adulting, I guess is what you say, is the best way to do. Give them more responsibility. And I'm not saying chores. I'm saying give them responsibility for making decisions.
Yeah. I love so much of what you said, Gayle. Like you guys, I hope you were paying attention, because she just gave you a gold mine of things that you need to be aware of, not only as an individual, as a woman, but as somebody who wants to bring a child into the world and give them a leg up, right? Because it's just like when you teach a kid a language, they're so much more apt to absorb that information and make it a part of their DNA when they're younger. And packaging it in a way that's appropriate for them to actually digest that information is huge. One thing that you mentioned that really stuck with me is the scarcity mentality surrounding money. And I think that to go back to what you were talking about even earlier on the podcast, that's something that generationally has changed. Each generation feels very differently about scarcity of money and how money is made and where we can get money and how we feel stressed about money. I feel like every generation has their own way of coping with that. And so much of your reality around your scarcity mindset is not only tied to your upbringing, but also the economic climate that you're living in. And the more prepared you are for that economic climate, the better tools you're going to have in your tool belt to be able to combat that. Because those mentalities, those thoughts that you have that are negative, there's no way to eradicate them completely. But you can put yourself in a position to have a more positive interaction with them than you would.
It's like learning on a foreign language, you know, like, if that's the language, if you can dream in that, or, you know, they talk about that, if you can dream in that language, you have it, you own it. It's a similar thing. So, you know, we're in a position right now in our country where we're making more money than we've ever made. And yet there's this huge, like, oh, I don't have enough money. I remember years ago when the government shut down for a month or whatever, watching the drama unfold of people. And this is so sad. There was a gentleman on saying, you know, well, we're just having such a hard time. I had to pull my daughter out of cheerleading class. And I thought, well, if you really were that tight that you couldn't go for a month without income, but you chose to pay for that, then that's not a function of the economy being bad or you not having money from it. If you aren't prepared to, if you're not budgeting well enough to have any gap, any extra, and have anything in reserve, then that's the real problem. And we want to externalize all of this pain. We always want to externalize the problem. It's not my problem. I didn't get myself in this situation, but who did? I mean, even, there's stuff's going to happen, like pandemics and, crises are going to happen. And being prepared for those requires that you give thought in advance to it. And we're all living paycheck to paycheck. Here's another interesting statistic. When I first started doing the research on the condition of financial stability in the country back in 2017, when we were doing the deep dive research, something like 46% of millennials couldn't make it through the month on their paycheck.
Yeah.
That was traumatic. That's our future, guys. These people are living borrowing, and then the people that could get credit were going into debt to cover their monthly expenses. It was tragic. I was so upset. We're at 74% of all Americans can't make it through the month on their paycheck.
I believe
it's going the wrong way. And it's this whole the pandemic, the this, it's all out there. And we want the government, we want someone else to fix it. And life is only lived by you. And I know there are conditions that we all need help and all that. But as a rule, as a direction that we're going, it's really sad that we've moved into this place where we're willing to put ourselves at that much risk and then blame someone else for the problem. That seems to be a real issue. And it's coming from scarcity. It's coming from, I don't have enough and it's not my fault. And, the I'm not enough part is the scary part, because we all have enough. We're sitting here watching this show on the internet. Everybody's got enough. We just have to learn to plan ahead and budget. Budgeting is a really nasty word, but plan.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, Gayle. Well, thank you so much. I did not know that we were going to get to be able to talk, to touch on that subject of scarcity. It's something that Michelle and I have talked about a ton before. And I just think it's something that I would love for everybody to have the tools to not have to combat in a negative way, because to your point, so much of this, as Taylor Swift said, you're on your own, kid, for a lot of it. So we have to make sure that we're doing what we can to put ourselves in a good position. And this has just been so wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us. Before we end, where can our guests connect with you? Where can they follow your journey? Where can they glean your wisdom?
Yeah. Well, I love talking about this. Obviously, I ran way over time, so anybody can call me anytime. My website is moolahu.com, and it's moolahu.com. I think my phone number is on there, but definitely email me if you want to have a further conversation about this, or if you have any good ideas. We're currently working on partnering with banks, credit unions, community banks, and financial education organizations, as well as some schools who are starting to use our app in the school to be able to manage some of their projects. So we're really open to figuring out the best way we can serve the most families in building truly generational financial capability, right? And so I will do anything in that regard, and love the conversation, and would love everybody's input and questions.
Absolutely. And we put, Michelle went ahead and dropped Gayle's information in the chat. So if you guys want to get it there, we also featured it on LinkedIn and on Instagram. If you guys have any questions about where you can connect with Gayle, obviously feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
It has. Of
course.
Great.
Awesome.
Have a great evening.
We'll see you guys next week. Super excited to chat with y'all about